Everybody, this is Perch. Here's a question to me, and it's this is a view down the rabbit hole kind of question. The question is, don't comics owe a lot of their success to trolls? Yeah. Okay, let's dig into this one a little further. The person writing the question basically states the obsessive compulsive nature of wanting to pick apart various details and stories, fight about continuity, all these kinds of elements are a lot of what created the obsessive fan, the obsessive customer that wanted to collect every issue, wanted to pay attention to all the ins and outs, and basically made comics what it is. If these people hadn't come into the picture, if it had always stayed in a world of casual fans and everything else, comics wouldn't have survived. I'm not sure that's true, by the way, but definitely comics benefited massively from these quote unquote obsessive fans, people who are wanting to know every in and out. And mini comics for quite a long time played on that. Particularly if you're reading comics in the 80s and the 90s, you probably remember mainly early 90s, not mid or later. There was a lot of little hints and Easter eggs. And if you are confused about what this person is talking about, go back and check out issue 32, editor notes inside comics. There was a lot of that. And I think definitely the comic publishers, the producers, the creators, and the editors knew that this kind of obsession is too hard a word, but basically this very connected, very uh, absorbed. That's not the best word either, but you know what I'm talking about. That type of customer was who they were playing to. That was their audience. And it was a very lucrative audience because these people could be counted on to buy comics every month. And frankly, as comics went from the newsstand to the direct market, that type of audience was what was necessary in order to predict orders, to know how much to print and how much to buy. If you had a very loyal customer base and you knew that you were going to be selling, 50,000 copies of a comic every month, you could order with confidence. And I think this was really the crux of kind of the early direct market, was that retailers knew what their floor was. They were confident they weren't going to have they weren't going to have to like throw darts at a board or use a crystal ball to figure out how much to order. They knew that there was a built-in audience, and so they were able to leverage that and make good bets and good guesses as to what was going to overperform and order accordingly. This was all part of the game. Comics started behaving differently in the 2000s, where, again, it felt like inside of comics, people started saying things that were contrary to the business, contrary to the facts in front of them. And they kept just repeating it over and over and over until eventually, that became tribal knowledge, even though it never aligned with what was actually happening in the store. And this is stuff like, customers can't count. If the issues get too high, customers will get confused and stop buying. Or, we can't have things that are too heavily, invested in continuity. There's this term, and a lot of people revere Jim Shooter for what he did. There's one phrase that gets brought up a lot, which is everybody is somebody's every issue is somebody's number one issue. And the logic there, as we've talked about before, is that people are going to be coming onto comics all the time. They're not just all going to start with issue number one. They're going to pick up a comic and they're going to start reading it. And that could be their first issue. And so you have to make it accessible. You have to make it friendly. Once upon a time, that logic meant that there needed to be some recaps, there needed to be some explanation of what was going on. And a lot of Marvel comics, in particular, during that time period, the first page would be some level of in-story recap. Very similar, by the way, to what you see if you just watch a show on Netflix, that you'll get here's what happened. Very similar to actually what goes on in manga with shows like Demon Slayer, My Hero Academia, where before they run the title sequence, there's here's what's been going on to quickly catch you up. Current comics, current Marvel and DC, they don't really do that anymore, or they do it in a very clumsy way. Either they do just a plain title page, and it honestly feels like they're just trying to save money, where in text, they might have a paragraph or two kind of as a recap. But why it worked back in the day is because it was, usually sewn into the comic. It wasn't this standalone recap page. It was actually the action would be beginning, and then Mr. Fantastic would be like, "I can't believe we're in this situation," and then there'd be a couple panels that Byrne would draw, kind of explaining how he got here. That was very successful. That's a good model, and frankly, that model would work today. Whereas the recap page, people tend to gloss over, skip over, and even though this tribal knowledge is every issue can be someone's first issue, nobody's really executing based on that logic. They may think they are, but they're not. But back to the original question, uh, do comics owe something to trolls? Um, it's that's kind of an extension. Somebody who's obsessive over something, someone who's looking for mistakes, kind of the whole no prize crowd, people who are obsessed with Easter eggs and kind of all the rest. Um, it those aren't the same thing as a pure troll. A troll is somebody typically who's wanting to make fun or poke to get a reaction, and that's not exactly what comics fans, customers used to be. I think, though, there was a level of, the engagement came with positives and negatives, meaning somebody who was really engaged with comics, collecting them, buying them, would be positive. I mean, the positives are they're spending money, they're showing up every month, and they're buying comics, and they tend to be very knowledgeable about the comic, maybe too much so, to the point that they would create their own storylines, have their own kind of fan fiction going on, all the rest. The negatives are that they frequently knew more about what's going on in the comic than the freelancers working on the comic, so they would be quick to point out mistakes and call creators dumb if they mess something up and that kind of thing. Um, but there seemed to be a better handle of those people once upon a time. I do think that personality type, generally speaking, I think social media has kind of changed all of it, but generally speaking, there was if not a friendship or a partnership, there was at least an uneasy alliance between the publishers, the creators, and this type of fan, because everybody recognized the value that the other was bringing. The publisher recognized that those customers, even though they would be annoying and obsessive at times, were bringing money, and so it was you don't want to isolate those people. And the customers who were poking at the comics still, they didn't want to live in a world without comics. So even though they were poking at them, they certainly didn't want them to go away. And so you had this kind of this understanding between both of the value that they were bringing. And I think that served comics very, very well. It definitely helped the two sides kind of engage, understand each other, and relate. Today, we've moved into a more polarizing area where it's, the only thing the comic industry seems to be able to accept is unconditional love. You're either all in or not. And if you get too picky, too obsessive about things, you have to do it in a loving way, not a critical way. If a creator makes a mistake, and you point that out, you're obsessive, you're an enemy, you're a trolling, you're bad. Regardless of whether you're spending money or not, you're bad. And I think that's the fundamental shift that happened. I don't think comics owes anything to trolls exactly. I think it's a weird way of stating it, but I do think comics and the audience it created, the personalities it created, that it does. I mean, certainly it is very strange because, and this isn't just comics, by the way, this is gaming and entertainment fandoms and everything. The people who are working in comics and games and in various entertainment fields, they seem to be they seem to have very little tolerance for criticism, and they forget that the people criticizing their product by and large are the same ones who are paying for it or buying it. And not always. And again, social media has warped everything. And certainly there's a whole other sport around just, trolling forever and criticizing. And that's just what people get off on doing. But uh, it's people were just a little bit more hesitant to attack those people because, they did make the connection that group is what's keeping the business alive. And today, that I think that understanding is gone. I think it's you're with me or you're against me kind of thinking. You're either all in support of what I'm doing or you're my enemy. And I think there's a third route, which is, hey, you may not be supporting everything I'm doing, but you are still paying for all of it. And so therefore, even though you may be annoying, even though I don't particularly like you, you're funding this business. You're funding me. So therefore, I will accept it. It's like there's people on this channel who go into the comments, and I don't delete your comments. I can't even remember the last, because all the weird Russian sex bot comments seem to be gone, or I don't see them anymore anyway. Those seem to be missing, and so I don't think I haven't deleted anything in forever. Like it's been a very, very long time. Now YouTube deletes stuff all the time for no apparent reason, and they put stuff in held for review, and I just rarely go and look there because it makes no sense too. Friend of the channel Larry King posted something up about comics and wrestling. There was zero negative, there wasn't anything remotely offensive or critical in his post, but it's sitting there and held for review. Couldn't figure out why. Still can't. But I am appreciative of the people who come on and make comments on this channel. You're helping it grow. You're bluntly, even if you absolutely hate it, if you are watching this video right now and you're downvoting it because you hate everything that I've got, those people exist. I know they're like, why can't you be more like, blank channel that somebody I like? You watched it, you clicked on it, you provided engagement. Thank you. That's, I guess, I don't know. Thank you. If you hate everything that I'm doing, but you watch it anyway, you're helping me. I don't know what you're doing for yourself because you just wasted a lot of time watching something you hate, but I don't know. That's your business. That's what you want to do. Go nuts. But comics could learn a little bit from that. And I think the people who work in comics, they do need to. Does need to be a little bit more of an understanding that, look, some of the people who are criticizing you day in and day out, it may be annoying and it kind of sucks to ignore those people, but they are, the fact that they know every single issue you write, every single issue you draw, they know all the details. Well, chances are they bought it. They bought that comic, and so they may hate you, but they put $1 in your pocket anyway. So you don't have to love them, you don't have to appreciate them, you don't have to sit there and take it, but it isn't a bad idea to recognize that some of the people criticizing you are funding you, and it doesn't mean you need to make a statue for them, but they it's better that than people ignoring you. It's better that than people who unconditionally love you and praise you but never buy a single thing you're doing. I mean, at the end of the day, having that money helps. At least until we all get our mandated government check. So, well, we'll see. Anyway, hey, what do you think? Crazy, I know. A lot of nuance to this topic, as always. I think some people hear this stuff and they're like, so this means that creators have to take whatever insults we give them. No, of course not. That's being extreme. But I think most people hopefully understand what I'm talking about. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. Are trolls critical to comics? Are trolls responsible for comics? I don't really think so. But, I understand where you're coming from. Thanks for listening.